Are we good?
Yeah. We're ready.
Hello, welcome everyone to Intro to Philosophy class by me, your host, Aquinas Hurd, and I am thankful to have Jimmy Edwards here as a participant slash maybe student. I don't know how he wants to frame himself.
Student, test subject. We're trying things out. We're doing a mix of trying to pilot some workshops on our platform, as well as providing some free service. But we had a little bit of logistics issue. There were a few teams that were interested, but either weren't available, or I think there was one who tried to log in and is having trouble. So I messaged, but I'm like, all right, well, we're here. I'm ready to learn, and I think it'll be cool to come in as a learner.
I also want to preface it by saying in the course description, I had mentioned that we would touch on, I think I said 6 of the most influential philosophers, at least in my view, and seeing that it's just going to be us two, and then, thinking about the hour constraint, I'm not going to do that part, just mainly focus on not so much the historical components of philosophy, except for one at the beginning, but just about what it is. What is philosophy? How is it different from other things? What are the branches? What might Jimmy's views be on the different branches? And you, as the audience that might be watching, for your own kind of consideration, what might be your own stances? You definitely have some. They might be more implicit, but in the course of this workshop, maybe we can draw some of those out, and if they're aligned with what is actually true, then make them more powerful.
Well, I'm excited, also a little bit nervous, because as the leader of an educational organization, putting my fundamental beliefs of reality, of the nature of knowledge, ethics, morality, like, do I even have them down well enough to articulate them? I guess we're gonna see.
Yeah, exactly. And so with that kind of in mind, if you don't mind, Jimmy, and I would do this if we had a group of teens as well. I just wanted to start out by kind of getting your general understanding of philosophy, what you think it is, if you might know any of the branches. You could definitely start out by saying, that you might have some stances and so forth, but we can flesh out that part out a little later if you prefer. But again, just getting an idea, and as an instructor, in general, it kind of helps, like, what is the starting point of your potential students that you're interacting with? And if you don't mind, then I'll kind of go from there. So
yeah,
tell me, what do you know about philosophy? What does that word mean to you?
So from what I understand, so there are these branches of philosophy that deal with the nature of knowledge, or epistemology, reality, ontology. I believe like beauty is in there, metaphysics, and like ethics and morality. And so kind of the nature of all of those branches, thinking, reasoning, but also like fundamental stances about the nature of things.
Okay. And then, like I said, we'll only spend a little bit of time on this. Do you know anything about like how philosophy got started in the world, so to speak?
How did philosophy get started? Well, from what I understand, there were many of the famous philosophers that we know today really were in, like, let's say Greece in circa like 500 BC and onwards. But I've got to think that maybe like 1,000 years before that, from what we understand to be like the time of, let's say, Moses, and when the early Old Testament was written. Got to think there was some philosophy happening there if people were doing such deep thinking as to be connected with God.
Okay. Have you ever heard Thales being described as the father of philosophy?
it's funny you mentioned that. I didn't know Thales to be the father of philosophy, but when I took a history of mathematics course in grad school, and Thales was the oldest mathematician that we studied. However, the idea of math being different from philosophy, they're so intertwined to the point where even like Pythagoras, there was the Pythagorean brotherhood, where it was religious to worship the cosmos and the truth of numbers, and how even like the Pythagorean triple, just math is literally everywhere. So yeah. I generally believe, even like as an educator, I think every student needs some philosophy to be woven into their education, even at a young age. It helps you with learning, helps with critical thinking, and I think that mathematics should be taught with more of a philosophy basis in some way. I've tried to teach with some philosophy concepts woven in. I mean, I've taken I would say like 2 courses that involve philosophy. Well, actually, that's not true. Like we do weave in quite a bit of philosophy in education, but not necessarily studying what you would think of like the historic philosopher. So I'd say I know more than the average person, but probably not enough to say that I know philosophy, or can say that I've expertise in it. Oh, I'm an excited newbie.
Okay. I did take some notes about Thales, and I just want to kind of get them on the record to kind of frame, again, bolster the case that he was the father of philosophy, and in the course of doing that, then talk about a little what he was doing that wasn't really being done before. That basically lends credence to that title, father of philosophy. So just for my notes, from my understanding, that all that we have of a record of Thales' views are like 4 fragments from one of it, I guess one or several of his works, and then him being referenced by other ancient Greeks. So we hear about him from like Herodotus. It's always difficult for me to get some of these names right. That Thales was a practical statesman who advocated for the federation of Ionian cities of the Aegean region. We also hear from others that he is said to have used his knowledge of geometry to measure the Egyptian pyramids and to calculate the distance from the shores of ships at sea. And then this next one is actually how I had first heard of Thales. And I'm trying to remember, it was at least 25 years ago, but maybe even 30 years ago. And I wasn't doing like in-depth reading, but for whatever reason, I do remember this tidbit. So the poet-philosopher Xenophanes claimed Thales predicted the solar eclipse. And in this case, it's stopped the battle between these 2 kings at the time. This was in 585 BC when he did that. And the reason, besides me remembering that, why that stands out, how was he able to predict a eclipse? Well, going back to how you had heard about him in math, like he had understandings of math. He had access, I believe, to like the Babylonians were known for the astronomy, way prior to him. I think at least like 100, or if not a couple hundred years ago, of making records and so forth. So basically, I'm assuming he had access either to some of their stuff or what was going on around that time, even in Greece, of it could be predicted by understanding what is going on, where in the past, a lot of naturally occurring events, which we know an eclipse now is naturally occurring. It's not like like Halley's Comet, although on a larger cycle, that is also naturally occurring. But what was very unique about Thales, in comparison to what had happened before, is his was a naturalistic explanation for something going on in the world. Now, with me bringing that part up, do you know anything about like the cultures that were preceded him, and kind of how did they explain unusual events from about nature and so forth?
Well, from what I understand, before that, is it like the Jewish people who would say there is maybe like a creator who's responsible? I don't know if that would be considered natural, but then the Egyptian pyramids were even before that. So from what I understand, there's like polytheistic gods, so maybe there's more mystical nature to things. Is that right?
Yes, and so like Egyptians for sure, even the Babylonians, going back to what you said, like the Hebrews, the creation was by divine command in Genesis. Let me, if you don't mind me, check out my notes right quick. Like the Egyptians, they worshiped the animals and they had their gods for the different seasons. Even the Greeks, even still during Thales' time and before it in that same region, the lightning and the thunder that was happening, that was because of Zeus.
Mm-hmm.
So the big difference between Thales and all the other prior thinkers, not yet philosophers, but definitely having views about existence and so forth, was mainly explained by gods.
Yeah. Well, it's just so fascinating that I said math basically helps us predict what is actually going on according to Thales, and that's kind of similar to what my definition of math is. It's a way of understanding, explaining, communicating what I might call like objective reality, which even that I think is like pretty deep, because what even is objective versus subjective reality? Maybe that's not what we're going to talk about today.
Yeah, definitely we're going to. So one, do you think, from what I said, as long as it is accurate, that Thales, again, particularly by the example of him predicting an eclipse, and again, I'm making the assumption that he had access to basically data that allowed him to do that, is it clear that that is definitely a break compared to how things were being done for before, as far as explanations?
I think, yeah. Well, I mean, in general, to observe a pattern and then use it to successfully predict something, I mean, unless you would say, oh, well, the gods were doing that pattern and then we just kept observing the behavior of gods. So then it's like, are the things that we see, is everything just natural, but it was also created, and that's just saying the same thing? But yeah, I mean, in general, us not waiting for some god to do something and saying, hey, we're observing something, let's actually try to measure things ourselves, and don't just receive something from gods whenever it happens, but we actually take some ownership. Sure, yeah, I mean, it kind of sounds like that would have been maybe a breakthrough in sort of like the direction of like what humans might do to learn of the world, like for us to explore, for us to take charge, for us to go out and seek truth rather than wait to receive it and just like submit. Although, like, to be fair, like one of my positions is that like if we are actually submitting to what I call God, which shares some of my beliefs, then we would be moved to go out and observe the true nature of what exists.
And that's a good jumping off point, if you don't mind, kind of delving deep right away into one of the the main branches. You said the earlier objective, and then world, and then reality. What is that? What is out there? What what constitutes reality?
Yeah. So I generally believe in learning as the process whereby knowledge is created through the transformation of experience. And I believe that what I most know are what I've observed and experienced through my senses. And then I also believe that there can be logical deductions for what I know, even if I haven't directly observed something. So, for example, like if I've put the pieces together to the point where I've, let's say, proved it something to myself, even though, let's say, someone is lying to me and I haven't like personally observed something, but there's no other way that something could be possible other than, I don't know, maybe like an act of God. Then like I would say like,
right, I got to intervene right quick. You said other than an act, so that means that could be a component, right?
yeah, okay. So then what is an act of God to me? I'm still wrestling with whether or not everything that's happening around me are all what I would say acts of God. Because I view all this as something that has been created. And so like some things that I think about is like, is everything God? I don't know that I would say that personally. Even though that there's like a creation, think about if there's like an architect, and you design a space. Are you that space? I would say like no, it's like a product of your creation. But I also believe that God being all powerful and all knowing, in all this, which I call our realm, God has power in this realm.
So maybe for my own kind of clarification, how would you define or even describe like what is existence?
Oh, that's a good question. Let me think. I view existence here as well. If it's something that physically exists, it's something that we can experience, I guess, like through our senses, like something that we can observe. Like if something is not here right now, if it doesn't exist, I don't see it, I don't hear it, I don't touch it. Although I like the word existence isn't something that maybe I've like really thought.
Let me add something right there, because in some ways, like when you said that basically the things, I don't know if it's a philosophical term, but like those would be existence, TENTS, existence. Like those are a things that exist.
Sure.
And my question is, how would you describe the totality of existence?
How would I describe the totality of existence? So do you mean like all of the things that exist?
Well, I'm just asking, like I don't want to like put words in your mouth on that one, because existence, like the everything. So the everything, what is that for you, like in that way of existence?
All right, help me out here. So explain a little bit more, because
I'm trying not to lead. So like, I'm trying also not to use like a tautology, like something that just reinforces itself. Like for me, existence is just all the things that exist. Okay. Again, I'm trying not to use a tautology. So to maybe make it a little clearer as a comparison, there will be people that will say existence consists of this world, this galaxy, our universe, the other universes, and a heaven and a hell. All those things, and there's multiple dimensions that we don't know about.
Okay.
So like the totality, what is that totality for you?
Okay, that's helpful. Okay, so yeah, I didn't know like what possibilities were with that. I believe the things that exist fundamentally are greater than what is in. I think I'm using this term correctly, but like in this realm. So like where we can fly in a spaceship universe, where we can physically go around here, so not some other realm or dimension. I believe there's more than that. So for example, like I believe that before and after our human, or at least my human life, I actually don't really know for you, Aquinas. I believe that I will go somewhere else, into what I would say is God's realm, like where God's like place that the creator or architect actually physically is right now.
Okay. Again, I'm not trying to, and I know I said in the course description, but obviously for anyone that's listening, not try to sway this way or that way.
Yeah.
Just try, whoever's here, to get a more explicit understanding of where their positions might be on the 5 branches of philosophy.
I also don't believe that there's more than one place. So I don't believe like there's either I'm going to go to heaven or to hell, some other place. I believe that I'm going to return to where I came from, and that all of this is like a giant life lesson.
Okay. And so again, for my clarification, so for you, existence would be all of the existence able to be observed or inferred by our senses, along with another realm.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And
which is not, I think it's fair to get this demarcation, which is not something that is necessarily evident by our senses. Is that fair or not fair?
Well, it depends on what you mean by senses.
So our ability, our touch, taste, feel, smell. What else am I missing? Sight, touch, taste, smell, sight, and hearing.
Well, I had something like a near death or something experience, where I had like a vision, like an interactive vision, and like the sense of also being in this other place, which is just like, like some people have like different religious or spiritual experiences, and so like that blew my mind that was possible, and I consider that to be experience. So I generally don't believe in faith isn't the right word, but like, because I believe in learning from experience, like if there's something I haven't observed, like even like historical facts, like I have, even if there's consensus, even like I might still question something where I'm like, I haven't really seen evidence. Like where's the archaeological evidence? Where are the writings? So for example, like different religious events or what are in different religious scriptures. I question certain events, even if there are millions of people who say, no, this definitely happened. I'm like, all right, well, I haven't seen it.
Okay. I'm trying to think, especially since you've already kind of shared your stance, which is the metaphysics, the nature of reality. Your stance, again, if I can formulate it accurately, is there is existence, which again can be experienced through the senses or inferred from them. There is heaven and hell, and I think you said like that could be like a one place kind of somewhere, one place somewhere, right?
Yeah, I also don't call the other place heaven or hell.
Oh, okay.
Like if I was to use those terms, I would say those are ways to describe what could happen here. Like if we all get to this peace and harmony idea, like yay, we're at our optimal human state, woohoo, which I think would be great, by the way. We should start doing that anytime now. Like I would call that basically like heaven on earth.
But you would still, even if that got to that state, you would still subscribe to the view that there is an other place that is not the existence that I kind of qualified earlier from the senses and so forth.
Yeah.
So again, your stance on metaphysics is just what I restated with your agreement, I believe.
Yeah.
And what's interesting, especially as you were describing the near-death experience that you had and the impression that it left on you, and then however you would word it, like what you saw, I don't know if it's like saw in the way that like we have an image in our head, or it's seen like out there, like I can see this pen, but unless you want to clarify that.
Yeah, I can.
Like, you saw that, and that for you was evidence of something.
Yeah.
Right.
Yes.
And so my reason for stressing is because we're about to then go to the other branch of philosophy called epistemology.
Yeah.
And what that subject studies is, how do we know what we know?
Yeah, definitely.
So on that branch, Jimmy, one, you could tell me how you personally think, like, and I definitely want to get to that, how you think humans can know things, but also you could just, if you think there is a list, give me just some ways that you might be familiar, either through your own use or what other people claim as ways to know. So what would be, in your view, or what you've heard other people say, what are ways to know?
Yeah. So in general, I mentioned before that like I view a lot of what it means to know through our senses and our experience, but also things that we can deduce or even like, let's say, prove. So for example, like I think one of the best ways we can know are through either things that are, let's say, purely mathematical. So we've designed our counting number system, 1 + 1 = 2. There are these fundamental truths that we have designed that have pretty much perfect predictability, reliability. So there's that, but also what I can directly observe and sense around me, particularly in a way that is effectively or almost effectively just as consistent. So like this keyboard right here, I can say that I know this is here. It's not like a flash in my, like, oh, I think I saw something and then it wasn't there. So I wouldn't necessarily say I knew it was there, but maybe just, like a little floaty or something in my eye was there. But I can say, I know this is here. Here it is.
So, Jimmy, right quick on that one. If you don't mind me saying, I feel like that is just illustrating your first one of evidence of the senses. Like,
yes, yeah,
you're
definitely
able to say that that's there because of the evidence of your senses.
Well,
right?
and that I know it's there.
But so when you say how could you know that it's there without the evidence of the senses? I'm saying, why is that not sufficiently explain why you know?
Well, so like 1 + 1 = 2, the concept, I don't need to see or hear or taste or smell or touch anything. But it's a construction that explains what I would say is true in the world. At least with 100% consistency, I've always known 1 + 1 = 2, other than in a binary system. So 1 + 1 would equal 0 in that case. So which is why I kind of like, even 1 + 1 = 2 is.
I have down again that your ways of knowing so far, evidence of the senses and mathematics. I hope, if it's okay, can we take just a quick detour on the mathematics? I've read this one philosopher in particular, philosopher of mathematics. I'm trying to remember what his name is. Gosh, I'm going to forget. Maybe I'll remember it a little bit later. So when you said 1 + 1 basically always equals 2, right? Is kind of what you're saying.
Other
1 +
than
1 always equals 2, and 1 + 0 would be 1, 2 + 2, and so forth. When you have, is there anything that is relying on? Again, I'm taking a little bit of a detour, but I think I can tie it back to the philosophy broadly. What is there an assumption about the 1 + 1 always equal 2?
Is there an assumption? What is the underlying assumption? Well, one, again, that we are in the real, or at least higher than like modulus 2.
You know what? Let me because maybe it's too. I'm only able to posit it because I read this particular guy's work, and then after I explain it, it's going to be more apparent. So I have this marker and this phone. Do these equal 2?
You are holding 2 objects.
So what did you have to quickly clarify?
Units.
So yeah. What I learned from him is what you're saying is only applicable like when it comes to all of math. And I'll have another thing also to say about it. Get your impression of it, is that there is the unit, a uniform unit of some type, that those 1 + 1 are where you're able to say they now equal 2, meaning that you're talking about the same kind of thing.
Yes. And the concept too, although even the concept of 1 + 1 = 2 is, I guess, assuming that, yes, you're talking about the same unit.
Yeah. So one, I just kind of want to make that more explicit, so that anytime like people are doing math, there is the assumption that the units that they're working with are of the same kind, right?
Right. Well, and for what the concepts that we're talking about to even make sense, there would need to be quantities of things. So, for example, like if you are in a one dimension or a 0-dimensional space, all there is a point. I mean, is there even the idea that there is anything? Not really. Yeah, and then in
but what's right quick, because you also touched on the philosophical thing when you said not anything. There is not a place, or I'm making. In your view, is there a place where there's actual nothingness?
I mean, is there a place where there's nothingness? I would say not actually, but in theory, we can imagine spaces of different dimensional sizes. So like in Flatland, if you have a 2D space and everyone is kind of living in a plane, so you can kind of like try to skirt around people, but there's no height.
But right quick, you did start out by saying we can imagine, so it doesn't mean that like there actually is.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, this is kind of tying back to philosophy and touching on the metaphysics again, that there is an actual place of nothingness, as opposed to it being like that thing is just not there, but there is still a there.
Mm-hmm. Oh, you know what? I guess probably I believe that there is actually a 0-dimensional space, because I can imagine, and I believe there at least maybe like higher dimensional spaces than all this.
Okay. Well, you just right quick, you didn't say that earlier, but now you're saying it, so that's interesting.
Yeah, well, because I was recalling like in this like near death experience, well, like when you at least believe that, or actually do, let's say, have an experience that is somewhere else, you start thinking about like things like dimensions and stuff. So if there is going to, let's say, be a 4D, 5D, or I'm not even necessarily convinced that all of this is a 3D or 4D space. You know, if you think about, like, a lot of people say there's this 3D space, but there's time, so that's the fourth dimension. But it's like, well, I don't know. I'll have to look this up. Maybe there is a definition of this. But like, let's say we had an additional sense, or even like, is our sense of smell, does that add an additional dimension to our experience or our existence? Or is like,
well, I mean, it definitely adds to our experience, because, you know, people that don't have smell or can't, you know, are blind, they're having less of an experience. It doesn't mean obviously they're lesser people, but they're having less of the experience of reality because they don't have one of the means to access the reality, right?
Exactly. And so for me, like in math, if you have an additional variable or an additional like literal dimension, you can map experience onto increasingly complex, let's say, graphs. And so we can view, let's say, someone who is blind, can't see. Well, we can view your experience based on what you're seeing. So like in terms of what you're seeing at any given time. But if your eyes are closed, then or if you can't see, then you don't have that axis from which to view all the rest of reality and like map it onto. So in that sense, like, are we in a many dimensional experience? I don't really know. Yeah, I guess I'd have to learn more about what a dimension actually is.
Okay. So that was, like I said, a little detour in math. One other thing that he said that I thought was interesting, again, detour from philosophy a little bit, that math is basically measurement. If you think about all the activities that math does, it's measurement.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just, yes, no?
And I think it's more than measurement. So okay. I had mentioned before, it's also about communication. So even if you can measure something, you have to be able to do something with that. Do you tell someone? Do you write something down? Do you have a graphical, visual representation of any kind? Are you going to create an equation which you can then use? So then there's about not only measure, even if you can measure, not only would you maybe communicate that, you might use it to do something useful, like measure the distance of ships or eclipses. So there's then predictive value and problem solving. And that to me is much different than just measurement.
So, okay. And to me, it doesn't take away, but maybe you can. Like I said, it's a little detour. I don't want to spend too much time, but I am kind of enjoying my curiosity and your own math background on this. Is you described other things that can come about, but isn't the first thing that a measurement is happening? Or...
Measurement, the first thing that is happening. Well, I mean, something can happen without you observing or measuring it.
No, right, but I'm saying, but once you start to employ math, aren't you basically measuring something?
No. So I view math also logic, for example. Logic is part of math. So if then statements, therefore, there's no measurement there.
Okay.
And let me try to think too.
That's interesting, because right quick, I wouldn't even necessarily put logic as being part of math. Interesting. I think it has similarities, and I think math has to be done. Like, math is almost the epitome of, again, I think of it as a tool, not so much as a science, but like it has to be logical for the math to work.
Yeah.
So I've never thought of them as being, I've never thought of logic as being part of math. I thought of it as a kind of a universal tool for all things for math, for chemistry, for ethics, for even, metaphysics and so forth.
Well, this is why the mathematics is synonymous with philosophy. Like Euclid's elements, I mean, geometry. There's no like there are concepts of algebra in there, but like when you get past the calculating maths of like calculus, differential equations, linear algebra, it's a lot of writing. Like it's paragraphs and pages, and it's all proof based. So doing math used to mean visual things and writing and logic, and that was pretty much all there was. And starting from axioms, that's very, very important that we start somewhere. For example, a line being what best joins 2 points, and that like starts the nature of geometry, that there are points, there are lines, there is space, there's distance, and then you get into like shapes like triangles. So like it's like a step-by-step set of proofs in the text that refer back to each other, and it builds logically this sense of everything that physically is here.
Appreciate that, Jimmy. So again, going back to the epistemology, which again is how does a theory of how man knows, how does he know thing? And you said evidence of the senses. I believe you've added like mathematics is a way to know. What are some other ways you think or maybe other people kind of think of, like, I can know this because what are they doing or saying they're doing in order to be like, I know this?
Yeah, I think for me, I view knowing there's like a threshold where you can. I personally would probably say I know something, even if I'm not 100%, or even if it isn't 100% necessarily true. So, for example, if I conclude something just because I've just seen this over and over and over again, no one said it's true, but I just know it, and here's my evidence, and I have unique knowledge and experience that no one has confirmed for me because they don't know the things that I've experienced. And so, based on everything that I have observed in my life, and maybe I'm wrong, but I would say I just know this.
Well, let me ask you this, and if by chance you have any particular examples, even just in your own head, and of course feel free to share them. But towards the end of that, what you said, you talked about experience, and that again makes me think, when you're saying experience, is that evidence of the senses? Like, you've experienced it, and by that you mean I've touched it, I've tasted, I feel. So again, are you just kind of re-emphasizing evidence of the senses on this last part of what you said, or did you mean something else?
Kind of. So, for example, when I was fired in Prince William County schools, I know that they were trying to get me out.
I understand what you mean.
I have over 1,500 FOIA requested pieces of evidence. I've talked to many people, but the people who fired me aren't admitting it. But I know what I experienced. I know what I have heard. I know what I have retrieved. I've talked to many people.
Okay.
So I know.
So tell me if this would be a fair way to categorize that. Your kind of certainty of knowing, I don't know if you would add that word to it. From what you just described, it seemed like, because I was there. I mean, I was there. We had, in the sense, we had this discussion, and I was one positive. Also what you're, claiming to kind of know, and then I added certainty. For me, I would view it as, and tell me why this wouldn't be correct. What you have is a very, very reasonable inference,
Mm-hmm. Yep.
which is not quite, because no one's haven't got someone on tape admitting it, but
Yeah, kind of actually.
But I mean, but then if by chance you got someone on tape, then that could raise it from more reasonable. I mean, from just reasonable inference to something that's more borderline like evidence.
Yes, I have lots and lots of evidence.
But again, all that is coming about from evidence of the senses. So it's still knowing because of evidence of the senses, no?
Yeah, but I guess this is like secondary in some way. Because like if we were to go to the people who actually had the power to discharge or terminate me, they would deny. It's like, oh, well, we did our job. Policies were broken, and here are the things. Now, the laundry list of incorrect or false claims of things that I said or did are absurd and weren't substantiated in any way. And so, like, there's motivation, there's intention, there are all the multiple administrators who are just telling me, Jimmy, the system's too big and we have mortgages to pay and mouths to feed. So I don't know what to tell you.
So again, that's evidence you heard with your ears, which you then make an evaluation based on prior experiences that have happened to you to be able to then go, not jump, because I don't feel like you're jumping to conclusions, that you can infer with reasonable confidence that was the case.
Yeah.
But again, I'm still trying to, if it's fair, it's all coming still from evidence of the senses.
Yes, evidence of the senses. And this goes as well to, like, I do believe in connecting the dots, which is I think basically what you're saying too, but the dots are evidence of the senses. And
right quick, the connecting of the dots, that would go part in my mind like towards the inference, but also we are being logical, you're being logical in your attempt to connect those dots. You're not throwing in there unwarranted components and just saying like, well, that this other thing random, I'm not even sure if I'm talking about right, this other random thing, like we're going to somehow pull it with these dots. It's like, no, it would be clear that it would be illogical to include this other kind of random thing. So
well, and so this goes then to what some people call like, I don't know, divine revelation, receiving something from what people might call the Holy Ghost, the Holy Spirit.
So right quick, Jimmy, is divine revelation another way to know in your view?
So when we have these aha moments, or these, let's say even a creative idea, which I think are two, well, maybe they're not quite two different things. That is something that we can't force ourselves. And so I guess technically I would call like those aha moments, or like, when you just wake up one morning and you just figured out something, but you like, it's like, oh my gosh, eureka. Like, if we could just go eureka all day and just make these amazing discoveries, that would be awesome. So in some sense, that's like a gift. Now, I think we receive more gifts when we are learning more about the world. So in some sense, I don't know if it's like divine, but just like naturally, like let's say I want to get here, and I'm making steps and I'm making steps, and then all of a sudden, like, the last leap happens. It's like, okay, but you did all of the work. So then you got like rewarded at the end. And that's one reason why I feel very strongly about the concepts in the care learning framework of collaborative, rigorous learning, because when we're actually learning better and better together and connecting concepts and actually standing on truth, standing on care. As we learn better, we are learning more efficiently, we're learning more deeply, and we're learning in a way that is actually, I would say, like aligned with reality, which makes the whole thing become even better. I mean, yeah,
Right.
that was a lot.
No. I appreciate. I just want to throw this question right quick, because you said like, I think you said like alignment with reality. So, for my own clarification, is reality the same thing as existence for you, and the way that you talked about existence?
I think it's probably really close, if not pretty much the same thing. Like, so is there anything that would exist but not be real? Like, I'm even trying to think of like math. Like I guess math exists and is real as ways, or it exists as a way to explain reality, and understand it better. So yeah, I guess
Okay. I just want to make sure.
existence and reality. Yeah. Is there anything else that's related to that I wanted to mention? This is just an amazing conversation, by the way.
You could, I mean, maybe I'll help you. You know, you're going with the eureka moments, and you were talking about divine revelation, and then you were saying,
Yeah. So generally, the better we learn, and the better support that we get, which helps us learn better. Like you being such a great teacher, Aquinas, and as you scaffold and you have logic, but also the supports in place so that we get a student into their zone of proximal development, there are things that we do and can do for all learners, and different things that work better for some learners that help them have those eureka or aha moments with greater depth or impact and frequency. Um, and not only with the thing that you're trying to help them learn, like their goal, but a lot of times when one thing falls in place, it's like, oh, and that's why this makes sense too. And then you're like, ah, boop, beep, ah. Like, that's cool.
definitely. Um, I'll definitely can stay longer.
Please.
Going back to again epistemology, how we know, and when I was asking you, even if you know other people say like these are means, and maybe just off the top of your head, you're not coming up with some of these that people often say. This is a way that I know, but I want to present them to you. And one, you know, see if you've heard that before, and then what are your views? Do either of these count as another way of knowing? So a lot of times people will say they know things because they feel it. I feel something, so that means that they know. So I want to ask you if you think that is a valid means of knowing. And then another time I'll hear people use the phrase like intuition. And they'll say that is a way that they sometimes know about those things. So one, if you agree or disagree, have you heard that? And then if by chance you agree with any of those, how would you define those? And I'm not looking for like a very formal definition, but just so that I know how you're using the word.
Yeah. I mean, generally, it depends on how they're using the word. But when I feel something very strongly, it's because I'm experiencing something like different, let's say, signs or so. For example, if you think someone is lying, you probably feel that they're lying because there are tells that you're observing, and there are things the person is saying, maybe the way that they're saying it, that just don't seem to be genuine, or like the motivation doesn't line up. Like there are things that are off logically and from what you can observe. And so that's what I would generally say is like when people say, I just feel it, it's because they're like, there was something this person said. Oh, and then there's this, but that's evidence.
So just to clarify, that when people use that, or let's say if you ever used it, for you, it's not so much that the feeling tells me, it's that the feeling is almost like a clue about something you are evidence of the senses picking up. And that is what has caused that feeling to arise in you. Is that a fair way to say it?
Well, the way it generally happens for me, and what I believe, is that we observe something, we perceive something, and we have an emotional reaction to it. So if I see, like, let's say someone, I don't even know, like touching someone in, like, inappropriately, or like creeper vibes or something, there's a reason someone gives off those vibes. And we get this like a very strong emotional reaction to it, because if someone is doing something that is creepy, that we get this idea of what they're perhaps capable of. And our very strong emotional response to it will have us like feeling that something's off. But generally, it's not the feeling first. There's something that, I guess, leads to the emotion. Now, it could be based on our personal previous experience. Maybe we have like a history with that kind of thing. So we see something and then we feel very strongly about it, and maybe it was nothing. So that would be like a, what is that?
Like a trigger, like a trigger.
Yeah, a trigger, like a false positive, something like that.
Like right quick, just to illustrate in case anyone's watching, like if you were someone in your teens and you're a girl and your mom often slapped you and this was her motion, and all of a sudden you're now, it's 10 years later, but maybe that happened to you 4 years straight, like once a month even, and now you're out in the world, you're in your 20s, and you're just walking and a woman's coming by and she's raising her hand, and you didn't know she's going to just go like this with her hair. But that, and the feeling could be, and it's based on, if you don't mind me saying, the evidence of the senses of an experience, and it's making that association. And the reason why is because, especially in this case, and with the particulars I gave, it was repeated enough that it became like almost an inner part of their psyche of how to interpret that physical movement.
Yeah, well, there's that. And like as an educator, we're often trained on signs of abuse. So even if we don't see any abuse or even any like parent or whatever at all, if we see signs in a child, there are, typically pretty consistent signs of what you would observe in the child's behavior that would be like, maybe we need to look into something, or at least talk to our admin, talk to counseling, see if there's anything else going on. So in that sense, that's still evidence. But even though we're not seeing any actual interaction, well,
right quick, Jim, if you don't mind me, you are getting evidence of whoever has instructed you, saying when these repeated things happen, which are the evidence, in their example that they're giving, when a child keeps experiencing this, then these behaviors or these triggers will often get exhibited.
Yes.
So then once you see them, as the instructor, your mind goes to the evidentiary example that instructor gave to you, right?
Yeah, for sure. And the degree to which we trust the source of that information might dictate, whether or not we would actually act on something. Like, for example, there's a lot of science with COVID and vaccines that's, may come from a place that claims to be reputable, but a lot of people are like, well, we don't trust the source of that information. Or, name whatever conspiracy theory. Well, the government says this, but I don't believe them. Or a doctor, not trusting your doctor, those kind of things.
So we did the feelings, and the way, again, not wanting to put words in your mouth, that there was still Oh, let me see if this is accurate. You weren't saying that we know things from feelings, but that feelings do make us aware, but that doesn't necessarily know the thing. Is
Yeah.
that accurate?
I would say that there's the feeling that maybe gives us something like a hunch that something might be true, and then we're kind of like we're at a heightened sense, like, I've got this theory, and then maybe like with our intuition, um, we would kind of have this theory based on our previous experience and whatever we've observed, that this is likely to be true.
So again, for the feeling, then you threw in the word intuition, that there is a, even if it's prior, it's prior, however far prior, but it's stored in our mind from prior evidentiary evidence of the senses type experiences.
Yes.
So okay. So my takeaway from that on feelings is you would not be the type that would go, I know this from my feelings. You would say, oh, like you just said, a hunch. Let me either introspect or investigate. Introspect, in my view, would be, what do I recall similarly from experiences, which would still be evidence of the senses? Or if it wasn't recollection, I have a feeling, I have a hunch. What more can I gather from my evidence of the senses in this moment to go, that feeling's warranted, and now I can act on what I now know?
Well,
Or no?
I guess I mean, yes, that's correct. But I also want to emphasize the importance of emotion. So we, and when I say we, at least the National Academy of Science, Engineering, and Mathematics, there is broad consensus that emotions are required for memory. So if you don't have any emotion attached to something, the brain literally has no use to remember something. So if you're riding in a car, or even driving, and you're like, oh, all of a sudden I'm just here. It's like you had no emotion to stimuli around you. The brain will not remember it. So feelings, emotions are very, very important. I don't want to downplay them at all. And this is one reason.
And I want, just so, because maybe you're emphasizing, like, I don't want to downplay them either. Like, emotions are so, like, that's how we basically interact with the world.
Yeah.
And you're kind of driving home the point. That's what will make us, like, we will have memories because there was some emotional tie.
And this is why I believe caring is so incredibly important. Like, we have to be personally and situationally interested in learning, particularly of things that are real, things that are true, things that are valuable, useful, novel. And so, if we don't care about those things, then life is just going to pass you by, and you're like, oh, I'm in a drift. I can't think. I can't remember things. I have no executive functioning skills because I just, whatever. Like that, to me, that leads to some sort of like hellish condition. So folks who are, and I've worked with many students who suffer in that state, where these students, I mean, unless you really have like scaffolding and the supports around you, it's so difficult for them to exist and function almost at all. Particularly these students who are what you might call brain rot through these devices and can't focus their attention or manage their physical body, even if they wanted to. That is so like I just feel so badly and so passionately about learning and supporting people, because I don't want a world where people are living in their own personal hells, and then we can't even contend with each other on anything or get anything done. Like, that's obviously not a good state. So when that keeps happening, I view, I mentioned heaven on earth before. I view that as like us being in hell. And when we can't even understand the, let's say, true nature of reality because we're being blinded by, let's say, big for-profit corporations, people in positions of power, politicians, governments, the people around us who may be gaslighting us or just not, treating us well, lying to us, all those things.
Gotcha. Yeah, I mean, going back to again reemphasize like the caring, especially when that's our organization. But even as we're talking philosophy, and we are interacting with the kids, and we want them to have the good experiences. I mean, it seems weird to say because I just do, but like you have to care. like I mean, again, for the audience, so to speak, like none of us as the core founding team would be here taking the time, doing all the other actions that we are doing to try to, expand the society, get more adults and kids and teens in. We're all doing it because like it matters to us.
Yeah.
We care about it.
And this is why I emphasize we need to care about people and learning. You can't just care about people, and you can't just care about learning. So, the idea that people matter, people's experiences, we empathize with human beings, but also truth, reality, facts, knowledge. Like I view those as like two, almost like objective and subjective, or like rational versus like emotional, something like that, or like order and chaos, that kind of thing. Like I think you need that balance, and I think everyone we work with really care about people, including yourself. Like you can't just only turn outward. Like you matter too. So I say care about yourself, care about others, and care about learning.
We can keep going. I know we've been on for a bit, and we're only on the two branches so far.
I mean, I'm available.
Okay, I go a little longer. So on the again epistemology, which is the branch of philosophy that deals with how do we know stuff, and through talking with you, you brought up evidence of the senses, mathematics, feelings, but with the caveats, I think that you agreed with my description of what's going on there. You threw in intuition, but I feel like maybe that's kind of similar to feelings as far as like what you think is going on in that process. One that we didn't touch on, and I know that it matters to you, but people, meaning you two, often will say that they know things through faith. How and what is that? Is that or how is that different from the evidence of the senses or mathematics or feelings or intuition?
Yeah, that's a good question. The way I think about it personally, so I mentioned now I have a threshold for where I would say I know something, and that it's not 100%. It's very, very high, and based on my experience and what I, let's say, maybe even would say convince myself of, just because I've seen so much evidence, and my evidence is unique. So even if I don't get that validation from other people, I know because I proved it to myself. So what I view as when people say they know something on faith, whatever they believe in has met their threshold. And so I view many people's personal testimony, which may include, similar to me, what I would say are experiences that are unique to you that can't be verified by others. And to me, if there is a like a sense, vision, being touched by the hands of God, hearing God's voice, which to me is a little bit different of what someone might call like a prompting, or like which may be a feeling or intuition. They may be a little bit interchangeable there. That's between that and what a person has observed from the people around them, the people they trust, the consistency of what they believe in accordance with with reality, what they can experience, the belief has met their threshold. And so even though maybe a person hasn't traveled to, in some sense, this other, maybe where God is, or has, or even has like direct sensory experiences with God, their threshold is met. The whole world makes sense to them, and there's typically also like some scripture that seems to be in alignment with reality that also makes sense with what they've experienced in reality.
Okay, so I wrote down, you said whatever they believe has met their threshold. That's how you would kind of describe faith.
Yeah.
Okay. So we have the two main branches that we've done is the metaphysics, the view of the nature of existence, reality. I'm using those words interchangeably right now. I hope that's okay, because that's how I meant them even when I asked existence, like what would consist of all reality, which you've already shared, and then how we know. We went over your stances on how you think people know, and now both those together, having that kind of foundation. Now, what should you do?
Oh, goodness.
That's ethics, morality, basically the same thing. Like, now, how do you figure out what you should do? And we'll let's just spend a little time, and we won't necessarily cover the other branches, but like let's get a little taste, at least from your perspective, of how does one go about figuring out what to do. And if you don't mind, maybe give me several ways, and then you can also include like your way.
Yeah. Well, you asked two questions, like what should we do and how should we figure out what we should do?
So let's do that. How do we figure it out?
Yeah. Well, I was raised in kind of a unique situation. Me and my two sisters attended a non-denominational church but not with our parents, with our babysitter's family. In the home, we weren't raised what I would say is like Christian. Like we didn't talk about God, we didn't talk about Jesus. We didn't read the Bible. So it was almost like we were raised secular in some way. But then like we also got the Christian experience. And so because of that, I identified as Christian when I was like very little. But by the time I was like later adolescence, I'm like, yeah, I don't believe in this. And so, I generally figured out what to do based on what I observed as a result of my actions and how I felt. So like if someone did something that I had a negative reaction to, like consistently, even for example, this comes up quite a bit in our space because we have a lot of freedom with our students. I've had to have a couple of discussions about dress code, for example, about like, ooh, someone wore this thing and I felt uncomfortable. So that to me, like my personal experience or reaction to something is part of it, but also when I look outwards and see the effects of other people's behaviors and my behavior, like that's like an inductive approach to building an understanding of what to do. So in that sense, like the figuring out what to do doesn't necessarily come from somewhere else, but I believe that as we, how do I want to put this? Like maybe as we keep learning more about truth, love, and care and practice and actually figure out what to do, that will like converge with what may be like an objective sense of morality or like what is good to do, what is right. And then we keep testing. So in that sense, I'm in some ways like secular or not there's a higher power that's where the objective morality comes from, and I am, because to me, those two would be the same thing. Like eventually, which I don't know if I'm saying that very well.
No, no, no. I'm just trying to make sure that I am interpreting it correctly. You said, at least when you were younger, you figured out, or how you tried to figure out what is the, how you try to figure out what I should be doing was by looking around and observing, and I guess seeing like the results of behavior. That would be like one. And then the other one, I don't know if this was simultaneously or it was kind of like after that kind of process. There was also, if something kept making you feel off, it could be sad, mad, or whatever, that gave you an indication about that behavior out there being good or bad in your view. Is that right?
Yeah. Well, and I mean, that makes me think of like the third thing, like the teaching. So this is one of like the one deductive way, the teachings of the people around me, mostly my parents, and then like other people I trusted, teachers, even friends. My friends heavily influenced my sense of good, bad, right, and wrong as well. Like my real friends, or well, I was friends with a lot of people, but the people that I felt a very strong connection to.
Something that's kind of interesting to me, at least, is like, one, it sounds like you must have decent people around you, because obviously, I think you're a great guy and very kind and nice and so forth. But another kind of thought that comes to mind is like, was that just happenstance that you're able to, like, if your crowd around you in that neighborhood in the school would have been, lack of a better word, like shitty, crappy, more clearly unethical, were you, if you could know this about yourself at that time, like, would you maybe have been different because like the way you're kind of picking up your ethics is like socially, just like from what you're seeing? But I don't want to discount that, depending on the teachings you might be receiving of whatever type of your parents, that if you were in this other situation I just described, you might have been able to see that as crap because you also had those teachings.
Yeah. So I was pretty much friends with almost everyone, like in my school. We had a conversation about this a few months ago. I was also involved in so many cliques, as as in kind of in the nerd crew, and I did all the sports and all of the activities and the theater and the choir. So I saw pretty much it all in terms of like behaviors and like beliefs from my peers around me. And however, like it's not like I observed things around me and then I just like tried to do the teachings. Like I filtered teachings because I didn't agree with them too. Like even of my parents, or of my sisters, or other people, because if someone had like a view about how things should be done or how to treat people, and I'm like, I don't think that's a good idea. But maybe they have a lot of other qualities, or other things that resonate with me. Like my own sense. I mean, I call it like my soul, maybe my intuition, just kind of feels that, or maybe even knows that a certain teaching is one that I should filter out.
So we're still on the topic, but I'm good, and because you've been willing right now, we get a little personal on it. Not invasive by personal, but like, do you recall being like 4, 5, 6, 7 years old, and like it kind of mattered to you about like how people acted, like you were kind of in tune?
Oh yeah.
Because right, and if by chance, if that is the case, I wonder one, how universal that is for kids. That, and then if by chance it's not so, like if you might be somehow more unique of a type of individual that pays attention or picks up on that stuff at an earlier age.
Yeah. Yeah, I kind of strange to say this, but like even at a very, very young age, I was very in tune, like what you're saying. Like even at 4 years old, I could look at every adult and that like every person around me and and I would always be told like I was like wise beyond my years and an old soul, those kinds of things. But even yeah, like being able to make judgments as things that were good, bad, right, and wrong. Things that I couldn't imagine people doing. So like having like a sense of morality, but like, is that something like maybe one is born with? Um, I think it's, well, when I think about my greater beliefs, I think it's possible. I think it's possible that people might be born with some elements of a sense of morality and ethics, which is I feel like that's very controversial in the field of philosophy, but that we keep learning here. Like I said before, I view this as a giant life lesson, in that I and maybe others, maybe some others, maybe not everyone, I'm not sure, that I was in this place with God before all this, will return, which is very consistent with the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, by the way. Um, and that it's also consistent with like there's this Rick and Morty episode where there's like an arcade and Rick like puts this like VR headset on and like I was like and then like lives a whole life and then comes back in like 5 minutes. Or like in Dragon Ball Z, there's the hyperbolic time chamber where you go and in one day you go in this other realm for a year and train, and after a day you're super strong now. So like kind of something like that is not unlike what I view as like what's actually going on here.
Uh, Again, because my point in the intro is not like to argue any of this stuff, but I do want to throw. I'm not trying to replace your idea. I am trying to. Well, maybe just for your consideration, like when you said, like, maybe I was, kind of born more with a sense of morality. Why couldn't it be what I'm about to say? And I'm not, again, trying to replace, but like, where I'm coming from and my own understanding of stuff. Why couldn't it be more like Jimmy was just a very smart kid, and depending on levels of intelligence, what I mean by that, high, super high, genius, whatever, that kids generally of a higher intelligence are just more broadly aware. They pay attention more. When they do focus, they can go a little deeper, if not a lot deeper. When they do focus, compared to an average intelligence, I hope it's okay to say, that they have that possibility to integrate all this stuff faster, deeper. Why couldn't it maybe just be more of that in play versus you were born with some kind of moral disposition?
Well, I think, well, I'm first that like it feels like really strange to even like utter what I said. Like it feels like I don't know, putting someone on like myself on a moral pedestal. But I think what you're describing is kind of what I'm describing. Like maybe it's not like born with, but just always practiced good learning. It's also something where like I don't remember really much before I was like maybe 3 or 4. So I think as well, like my parents did a really good job of raising me, but also that I was very socialized all the time. We had spoken a few months ago and we talked about this, that I'm one of twins. And that really accelerated the learning of me and my sister because we just piggybacked off each other and taught each other and played together and taught each other to read and colored on all the walls, which my parents didn't like. So yeah, so I think it's like yeah, probably a mix of those two things. So yeah, I mean, maybe it's not like being born with morality, but like I said, I just remember like being like 4 and like kind of being in tune.
So you definitely described some, if not most, of like your process of like figuring it out. Then basically, what was the conclusion about what is the kind of right behavior to exhibit?
Care. Yeah, like I when I look back at
And right
my
quick, Jimmy, by right, like what is moral action? Like what do you think is, again, how do we figure it out? You described what you were doing, which was the process of figuring out, if not having figured it out. What was it that you figured out?
I figured out, I'm basically like if you literally look at the care to learning framework, those, when we said before that like each person has their own unique experiences in the world and they can figure out things that no one else can figure out because of that unique experience. One of the, I mean, the defining feature of research is that we generate new knowledge. And what what I learned through my research, I had to, as a researcher, take what all the participants around me were saying, my interactions, and I was really questioning very well action research, but also merging that with my own biases as a researcher, which every researcher does. Every researcher has some bias. And as a universal teaching and learning framework, had to, whatever product needed to be consistent with my own personal life experience and which includes what I had always observed around me as great learning behaviors and values. So for example, like the idea of compassion. So I define it as empathy with action. I never used that term, but in my research where I went to all these different religious institutions, actually started reading religious texts and got to learn, oh, people are saying compassion. What is that? But then I like looked at my life and empathizing with people, helping people, taking actual steps to do something to serve people, to add value. I just kind of always lived a life like that. And I noticed that people who live lives of service and kindness and compassion thrive, are very fulfilled, report being fulfilled. I observe that curious and compassionate people are fruitful, have access to resources, which includes people because they've built relationships. They value other people and themselves. They take care of themselves and others. They typically enjoy learning and new experiences, but also a certain amount of consistency and structure in their life, which like kind of maps to all the other parts of the care learning framework. And so like kind of all that together is, even like what I'm describing right now, is kind of like what people should do in my worldview. So living a life of curiosity and compassion, standing fundamentally what resonates with people in the rest of the world, truth, love, and care. I've just seen time and time again that these foundational concepts, and an orientation that we need to choose. This is actually a very important piece. We talked in a previous episode. We all have freedom. I believe we have agency, except in cases where we are compelled, maybe like we're in a coma or something, or I've sneezed before, and in those moments I am compelled to take a certain action, and so I'm like trapped in my body for a quick second. Yeah, but in general, like care is a choice, and like what motivates us to do anything so that we're not just like brain rotting, like choosing curiosity and compassion. It's not necessarily obvious, or even, I don't know if natural is the right word, but like you wouldn't necessarily think we should help people or that we should want others to succeed necessarily. Because, for example, if I've talked to many people who are like, I'm here to get mine. I'm gonna make my money. I'm gonna. I don't want kids. And I want to play video games and kind of just enjoy my life. May or may not work out, and I'm good with that. Um, like even like logically, like if lots of people did that, like, what kind of society would we have? Um, and so yeah, so like I view acts of curiosity and compassion, emotional intelligence, living a rigorous life, which doesn't mean like super monk disciplined, but being in the zone, generally yourself, and aiming for our community to kind of be in the zone so that you're kind of like, okay, what are the needs of my community around me? How can I help? What problems can I solve? But also I'm going to take care of myself, so I'm not going to take on too much. Kind of finding that balance and sweet spot. And everybody choosing to try to do that is what I think will be required for us to get towards something like heaven on earth, achieving a state of generally peace and harmony.
All right. I got no, I mean I got a good idea of your ethical views, what you consider right behavior, so to speak. Thank you. Thank you. Like
and what I think is really cool is that like I didn't say God anywhere here, like in well, at least in describing this like moral ethical framework. However, even though that's like these are the products of my secular, completely secular research, I also believe that what I described and what I try to live, I don't know if I'm doing it perfectly, is godly living. And that very similarly to particularly like the foundations of Judaism, that's like the ideas that will keep advancing towards God or towards some alignment with God as we live and learn better together will never be perfect. That's not the point. But that, you know, if we're going to aim for something and we've got good and we've got bad, we've got right and we've got wrong, we've got true, we've got not true. Let's just try to choose good, right, true, love, care, do that. We're going to have a pendulum swing. We're going to make mistakes. We're going to give each other grace, show compassion, forgiveness. But also, there are some things that we won't forgive. Like I actually believe in the death penalty, for example. Only in cases where someone can't be like safe / rehabilitated and or won't repeatedly so many times that there's so much harm happening that like at some point we have to make a decision about a certain level of harm and future harm.
interesting.
Which that kind of threw something in there at the end.
No, and I was just thinking, like I've been a long timer. I'm trying to think. Someone switched my mind maybe 10 years ago, strongly on the death penalty. And my caveat is, as long as we have epistemological certainty, and someone that countered to me said, you know, in the court of law, you're basically not able to have that as the threshold. And I'm like, well, then if we can't have that, I could not be for death penalty, because like it's never worth it if an innocent man got killed, you know, because their life is just gone.
Yeah,
so
sure.
I am broadly supportive if we could have that epistemological certainty. Basically,
Right.
you know, every time it's going to be employed, and that doesn't yet talk about what crimes would constitute it, which you and I maybe would differ on. But in order to be enacted, it could never be on an innocent person. So unless that could be a guarantee,
Yep.
then I can't be for it anymore.
Same. Yeah, I agree with that. And I also think we need to be very careful as what counts as evidence moving forward, because an AI, you know, bot or whatever can just generate countless videos, photographs, signatures, whatever.
Voices, like everything.
So if someone is in the court and it's like, oh, but there's all this evidence, like when I got fired, like there's a bunch of invented evidence, but it's not true. I mean, but now some things are like kind of twistedly true. Like I wrote a guitar song and played it in class, and that was part of one of the claims. but they also said that it was an act at like being weird.
What I was going to
Whatever.
say is like there could be particular actions that they're indisputable, but the evaluation of those actions can definitely be in dispute.
Yeah, and so I also, would say then that someone's like being tried, then if they're like, no, I'm innocent, like look, here's XYZ, and like I'll do whatever, like yeah, like I'll work with people, like I don't want to be given the death penalty, then like I'm generally willing to, I don't know, like consider some kind of rehabilitation. Like I believe in grace and forgiveness and compassion with, I guess repentance. And I also don't know how many crimes or whatever, how much harm would need to be like I don't know what my threshold is for that. Like if someone just let's say pathologically, like even if they believe they can repent, but they actually have a mental condition where they must do all this harm just physically, like I don't know, like some people might call that like possessed or something. Then it's like, okay, like how many people have to die? And you say, oh, but please, like forgive me, I'll try. So I don't know what my threshold is on that. But I will say the behaviors of like in-person people, and what happens in that context is going to be very important for me, just because I don't think we're going to be able to trust a lot of digital, maybe even some physical evidence, depending on what the physical evidence is either, of what can actually be created. It's going to get really weird.
Yeah. It sounds like you've thought about it a lot. I've thought about it some, but yeah, like what constitutes proof, evidence? Like that was the phrase you used. It's not gonna. Doesn't seem like it's going to be so clear moving forward.
Yeah, and that's why I have become so much more strongly convicted about my own behaviors and like my presence. So even like getting to meet everyone on our team and like trying to live a life that's I would present to the world and to God, look back on if I die tomorrow, if I want to look back, like I want to try to live as good of a life as I can, and like have like more almost like types of evidence of godly behavior. So for example, I was always like against, not against, but like scared of posting anything online, just because like I was a public educator, like I just got nervous. But now I'm like, well, like I want to get connected with people, and I want to like get myself out there so that if my previous county says something or tries to smear me, or one person who heard something is like, oh well, I'm going to put a comment on here, like okay, but then like look at all this other evidence. So in some sense, like I want to be very transparent, like in my life. I also am a little like nervous and scared about like my reputation and about I guess like what people think of me to an extent, which I don't know, maybe it's like an insecurity. I don't know.
No, I mean, that's your call, but I would just say like it doesn't necessarily have to be so, because like you are trying to make an impression, you are trying to get your name out there. So understandably, it does matter what some people will say. I don't know how it sounds like some advice on that. It's like, but doesn't it really like kind of just matter to you depending on who those people are, the quality, their intentions, motivations? It'll still suck. Like I'll be frank, the assholes out there and the haters, and they say whatever, but like what's true, and the people who respect and are connected to you know what's true, the evidence we've seen. And then others who get to know you, you're obviously an in-person space in Virginia, the Nova Pod and other stuff. So like more and more evidence of people interacting and going, I know this guy, this is what he does, I've seen him in action. So like whatever amount of haters. You know, you could be on YouTube and have a video and maybe there's like 1,000 haters, but like, what do they know? Like, you know, and the people you respect or the people that care about you, they know. In some ways, what matters more than that, besides like you yourself knowing, but like the ones that are actually doing stuff with you, they're not going on and making all these derogatory and bad stuff. So like, not that you get us, it's not that we validate who you are because you know that already about yourself, but like you keep having people wanting to do stuff with you and, you know, do stuff that takes work and shows that they're caring about what they're doing.
Yeah, definitely. Well, and
I would almost send it, Jimmy, just right quick and say, like, remember that as you might have any apprehensions about, you know, becoming more public.
First of all, thank you for that, Aquinas. I always appreciate your advice, and you help even like in this conversation. You give me considerations. I'm already like learning, changing some of my views on some things. So I also like I'm not trying to like personally do something like get myself out there so that I can, I don't know, earn money or fame or something, but I am on a mission. Like I feel very strongly called to serve, and I view where society is going broadly towards, you know, basically a hellish condition at an existential threat level. And the only way I think for us to combat that involves like practicing, like me practicing and positioning myself and others to be advancing a different way of doing things that a lot of people agree with. Like, yeah, let's show curiosity and compassion, but it also needs to happen at a systemic level. So there are like political considerations, and so like there does, you know, leadership generally involves like these different frames, like relationships, or like human resources, like politics and power, and then symbolism like ritual, theater, and kind of those four frames together. Like I try to be mindful of all those things that need to be in place, and I was never it's like that four frame approach comes from this leadership duo, Bowman and Deal. Like I was never like a political person as a teacher. I've never done any campaigning or even like been super interested in like power dynamics within any of my schools, because I was just a great teacher. I love what I do, and I just love the kids so much. And there you go. That's all I needed to think about. But now I have to like think about like more system level, because I wasn't in as much of a leadership position, and so I'm learning by doing. I'm getting a lot of counsel from you, from my family, from even like students, like other families, all the educators you work with, all the business owners I come across. It's been really cool, but I will say there is a lot to learn.
On that note, let's go ahead and end it, Jimmy. I just want to say thank you for taking the time to do this workshop with me and being so open and willing to share your views. And I hope you got something out of it. I hope you felt comfortable the whole time. Visually, evidentially, it seemed like you did. And I appreciate, like I said, I haven't formally run a workshop like this, so I appreciate getting the opportunity to have some practice.
Well, I gotta say, Aquinas, you are a gifted teacher. I mean, even like your ability to like choose when to ask questions, when to give considerations, like you're as a philosophy teacher. I've talked with several like philosophy like teachers, philosophy fanatics, and you. I think part of it is that we have a personal connection, so you can draw from experiences. But I thought this was really great. Can I ask you, like, is my like worldview or anything, like, is it like unique, or is there any like not judgment or evaluation or like assessment of like my views, or like do I fall in a certain category of like
You mean like if I were to maybe try to label you like you're more of like a Platonist or
Yeah,
Kant
yeah,
or Aristotle or interestingly, there were some people that were coming to mind, like different parts, and like some of it, to be frank, is like what resonated with me because we have some overlap, although we definitely have different worldviews, and a lot of kind of what I was hearing when it came to like the care framework, which I always say I'm familiar with, but an idea which I didn't want to intervene as you were talking on that, put on you what I'm thinking broadly, but like Aristotle was known, his ethics, morality was eudaimonia, which is basically like a life of flourishing. And I couldn't help but think like, as you're talking about stuff, I'm not saying that encapsulates all of it, but like there's definitely like a flourishing kind of component to it, which again, Aristotle, I think some of the way that they label him is like virtue ethics, which is about like basically like serious consideration for character and that our actions can determine that. So I was getting a big feel of that from you. On the metaphysics, especially as you were talking about math, and I actually did many hours of kind of research and preparation. I was like, should I put this in there and that in there? And how much about the history? But it got me to reread some aspects about the Pythagoreans and their fascination with math. And somewhat to your point, like when philosophy was first, I say philosophy, but like those kind of philosophical questions, because it wasn't yet systematic until we get to Plato, even though Thales was the father, he didn't yet have explicit stances on all the branches like Plato, who's the one who basically said these are the branches. But going back to the kind of still philosophical thought that was going on in the Pythagoreans and how they were seriously mystical, there was not God at that in their area, the God of like, the Hebrew God, but they kind of reified, I don't know, I think I'm using that word, like they made numbers almost like this is my word, like transcendental, borderline religious kind of thing. And I'm not saying that you per se have that view, but you have some inklings of that. But it might be, it doesn't feel like it's as, how do I say it? It's not central to who you are the way that it was like basically a religion for them. They already had the religious stuff and they had the numbers that were like these awesome trans-dimensional kind of things and they got joined together. Like that is not you. And I don't know yet how to tie in your admiration, definitely warranted, but like you give some serious weight to mathematics that is and to me at least outside of like how we typically think of it. But that could also just be more because you are a little more philosophically inclined and you think like of bigger picture, bigger implications. So it might just be currently that it's somewhat combined because maybe if you did, I'm not saying to do this or not to do this, but if you thought more on it and maybe had to write some stuff, that it would kind of separate a little more. And at least from my perspective, the mathematics might be less like up in the air, like in their way, but you're not in that Pythagorean one. I'm saying?
Right,
Does that make sense?
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, definitely contrasts with me.
So I guess that's most of my take. And then the other one, there was another Thomas Reid, was a Scottish philosopher, I think in the 1600s, who was really influential on the founders, and he's definitely religious, but he is like potentially the most sensible of the religiously inclined philosophers was Thomas Reid, and I can't help but think he's was partially responsible, along with Thomas Paine, for like the deism for some of the founding fathers, which means deism, just my interpretation, there's a God, and then he's there, he got things kind of started, but then it's up to us to kind of figure out. I'm not for sure saying, that is your view, but Thomas Reid kind of has some of that same feel of like still like trying as hard as possible, evidence of the senses, but it's like just in that part, I still gotta say there's God, but like I'm gonna keep working evidence of the senses on everything else.
Yep.
That was another one that kind of came to mind.
Cool. Well, yeah, I wrote that. I'll look into some Thomas Reid. Yeah, maybe read a little bit more Aristotle as well. I've read some Aristotle. So
and that was mainly the ethics. He has the Nicomachean Ethics, I think, is the book that captures his view on that.
Cool. Well, Aquinas, here's to many more deep conversations. Join our Big Ideas Club, where Aquinas will be there. We're looking forward to engaging with everyone. I just think like so many people could benefit from understanding their own beliefs, and thinking about what other people what their views are about all the different nature of knowledge, reality, metaphysics. I'd love to almost like ask you some of your, well, I think we've talked a good bit of your views about this, but that'll be for another time. Do a deeper dive. So appreciate you being on here, Aquinas. Hope you have a great rest of your evening. And this is a long one, so if anybody's watching this, hope you enjoyed.
Thank you, Jimmy. I enjoyed it too. I appreciate you being here. All right, man. Take care.
You too.